Here at the St. Petersburg International Economics Forum, we have the biggest names in finance and business, and you don't get any bigger than Oleg Deripaska, the billionaire, the head of the biggest aluminium company, Rusal. Now, I got to ask him about the theme for 2013 about tax evasion and tax avoidance, and if enforcing international rules and regulations could realistically work.
This initiatives, try to understand why company took advantage, of offshore zone. Yeah, they must just provide, better, condition at home, and then company, maybe consider to change the way they sail, to change the, inside logistic in their value chain creation. This may work for some countries. But we have to understand that there would be some country who would lose, this opportunity. And for Russia, we have quite a high tax rate compared to the resource-based economy. In Russian budget, 40% of GDP is quite a high, result which was achieved already, through the proper tax administration. But a lot of things could be done.
So is it fair to say it's the toughest challenge for the Russian economy, and considering does the Russian economy even work without offshore?
That's not a challenge at all for Russian economy. Russian budget, almost in surplus. We have laws, public debt to GDP. It's a challenge for U.S. economy, which try to fight with, budget deficit. For UK, which struggle with the growth. No, it's not our story, to be honest.
Right. Let's talk about investment perception of Russia, because that's what we've spoken about today. As a Russian businessman, do you feel that the environment is getting warmer? Do you feel perceptions are changing towards doing business here?
Once I saw poll results, and there was two different groups being interviewed. Ones who work in Russia, who has experience in Russia, and they have completely different view from those ones who just got some information from international media or internet. And I think it's a true story. If you work in Russia, you understand what's advantage to be here, how qualified our people, how rich resources, how available infrastructure in reality. What's real story about Russian court system, about Russian justice system, because if you international businessman, you work in China, in India, even in Brazil, you can really compare, which system fair. Of course, we have a lot of things to do, and Russia tried to, try to improve, all what I said. But in reality, things not so bad. And if you work here, you can make profit, and you can create sustainable business. This is the reality for the big companies. Look at Volkswagen, Toyota, even Gen. This is reality for the small company which come for Russia to provide new way of service and manufacturing.
So does Russia just have a bad image then? Is it an image problem?
No, I think it's it's easy. Russia is not a country. I heard today in one of the panels. Russia is a continent with its own culture, tradition. And of course, you wanna, you could imagine that we're in London or in suburb of London, but we're somewhere in Voronezh, in Samara, and you need to adopt, your view and the way people live and the way people look at your request. And this is, something which, just needs, real, patience, to understand.
And staying with Russia, I want to talk about the Russian ruble, because there's been talk about depreciating it. What advantages would that give to the Russian economy? What effect would it have, and is it a good idea?
Actually, it was some discussion, what would be done by central bank on currency, what would be done by Ministry of Finance, and there was suggestion that because would be more independent policy, from Ministry of Finance, Russian ruble, could, we can see weakness, in the future. Let's see. It's very difficult. So far, we have a positive current account balance. More money in Russia than goes out, and it would be very difficult, to with such a export-based economy, resource-based economy, to see that it would be some easing in terms of value of ruble. I can't see it, but it would be, of course, positive for the short period of time, for some industries and agriculture.
And do you think that the euro is still too heavy?
Yeah, there is no doubt. And this is the reason why we can't see any improvement. Yes, now there is less attention on European zone because of prospect of United States. Maybe after Bernanke last statement, it was a bit shaken. But this is the reality. Europe could not start real growth fast unless they will not lower the euro and create some room for competitiveness.
And I want to get your opinion on the US to EU transatlantic trade deal that's going on at the moment. Is this a good idea, or will it just close the doors to developing countries, traditional trading partners? What's your view as a businessman? Is it a positive move?
I'm afraid it's just one of the initiatives which will create nothing. In my personal view, US should much more focus on Latin America and South America. This is their zone of trade advantage and actually opportunity to develop better tie will create better export opportunity for US company. I'm not sure about this possible transatlantic treaty. Maybe just nice word. In reality, wouldn't create any substantial difference.
And I want to talk about the Rosneft and China deal that was essentially struck up. $60 billion we're talking about. But what does that mean for trade? Is it all about China and Russia from now on? Is that the right way forward? Is this trade tie just going to increase and develop as we go forward? Is it all about the East?
Yeah, but look, it's at 2/3 of maybe more, say, 80% of Russia in Asia. And if you compare, yes, $60 billion, but it's about 7 or 10 years. I don't remember, what's time horizon. And if you compare our trade with Europe, I think our trade relation $430 billion with Europe, only with Europe. And I think, it's relatively small number. It's fair to understand that Rosneft developing Eastern Siberia deposits will need market its soils there. We finished pipeline to the Pacific Ocean, and there is our customer in Northern Asia, Korea, Japan. But our main trade customer in Asia is China, and of course China wants to create more opportunity for its own market. That's why they propose such a good deal for Rosneft, and why they shouldn't take it.
And I want to ask you, you've mentioned before in the past that you don't believe in a slowdown to China, that it's all hearsay. Do you stand by that now?
I think China still have a reasonable opportunity to grow, and their new urbanization program, a lot of efforts to fight with environmental damage which they created over expanding few industries like steel, aluminium, cement, chemical, will create for them a chance to stabilize the growth. They have to understand, we talk about growth of 10% 10 years ago, when China was half of the size, and we talk about 7% now, when China economy 2 times bigger. In relative number, you couldn't compare, and still maintaining this type of growth, it's pretty impressive. And we see the bureaucracy, it's quite efficient, solves the problem. We see their companies, they're quite strong and developing a lot of know-how. I can see that. Plus their focus on local market, on developing new infrastructure, will also support this growth. I can see the slowdown, and I can't see much risk in next 2-3 years in China.
And I want to talk about metal prices, because that's obviously your bag. They've taken a bit of a battering. What's the situation now, and are we ever going to see pre-crisis prices again?
In what sort of
Well, what are metal prices doing now, and what are your concerns with metal prices?
As we said many times, yes, there is a part of emotional reaction from the market on Bernanke, on Fed, on stimulus, on in general on policy in US, in Europe, on this China expectation. But I think we need to do all commodity sector producers need to do its own way, its homework. We need to reduce our operation output. We need to produce less. We need to give chance market to digest, and reduce volatility of the price and based on clear sign of supply and demand balance. Because in general, if you look at aluminum market, last 5 years, our growth was about 6% consumption. We started from the world consumption 36 million ton in 2007. Now next year it would be over 50 million ton. There is more and more aluminum in transportation, in construction, in packaging, and manufacturing of complex product. At the same time, we I think been too optimistic about growth potential. In India, how quickly Europe could restart its engine machine. And now we just need to take and scale back the whole market. It's not about to shut down one producer completely. It's about to reduce output 7-10%, give market time to digest the stock, and then clear supply-demand balance will give us an indication where to go. And this should be done for all players in copper, in nickel, in aluminum, and zinc, and I think it's in steel. I think it's important exercise, and we see that investors already called, that they don't like any greenfield, they don't like any new project, and I think they've been right. We need to produce more return on existing assets.
And I want to quickly move on to the stock market as well, just in general, because we've seen declines. What is the story there? Why is the Russian market not managing to rebound?
Not very, how to say, good environment on the international market. Let's see. Companies perform, based on underlying, strengths, and I see that Russian companies developing in the right way. And we have a great potential in the Russian market. As I said, construction, residential market, on agriculture, we can see a lot of improvement, manufacturing, transportation. Government announcing more investment, and resources would be supplied to solve some bottlenecks. Actually, very optimistic that we will perform better. How market will react? There is a lot of emotions about Fed policy. There is still dispute how attractive Russian stock market because of corporate governance and so on. But let's see in 3 years. I'm optimistic.
Good stuff. And finally, the Federal Reserve as well, because we've had a few teasing points from November 19th talking about tapering this $85 billion bond purchasing process. What will happen if that does come to an end? Is the global economy ready for the tap to be turned off?
I don't think, will U.S. eliminate its budget deficit? Will U.S. Treasury ready to pay higher interest on their debt? I just think it's sort of testing the water. I'm not sure it was done properly in the right time, but it's done, and based on promises, people really change their view on some of their investment. I think it was premature, and we will need to wait till December and then properly. But I can't see that the U.S. could change. It would be a big disaster for them. It would be a bigger disaster for Europe. That's why I think the reasonable people, I'm sure that they will take in consideration all things.